can be heard. Um, we do have somebody over on Twitch. Again, welcome. Uh, gonna try to do what we can today, and unfortunately, it is rather hot, and the AC is broken, so that's kind of what I've got right now until we can get the AC fixed. So, deal with what we got. And with this Texas heat, it is not fun. But what we're going to do today is we're going to go ahead and start off with the problem with ground beans as exposed due to the reaction by Lord Intellectual. Um, we're going to go ahead for this part. This is also going to go up on YouTube as well for the recording. And so the problem with ground bean is bias exposed due to the reaction of Lord Intellectual. If you have, the chances are, especially if they may be more of a right-leaning channel, you have likely seen someone doing a react or having a sponsor of brown news. Those even some more center leaning. And there's a good chance that they have been sponsored by Ground News at some point. Have I tried Ground News personally? Yes, I have. Are there some things that I noticed are kind of interesting? And yes, I would like to hold off on what my overall thoughts are, so that way we can see what Lord Intellectual has to say about it, as well as what whoever he is reacting to. Looks like the Daily Disinformant video on it, to see what they have to say about it as well. And we can go ahead and mix in my thoughts and opinions on ground news as we go.
Hello there. Welcome all, and thank you so much for stopping by. Guys, we will be looking at a new channel today. This actually came across my dash, and I haven't seen the Daily Disinformation before, so we're going to be forming our opinions together today.
Yeah, I haven't. I haven't seen them either. So this is going to be something new for me as well. Um, See what on earth they're all about. So get into it.
However, it is covering a topic that I have a lot of opinions on, and I haven't seen reflected elsewhere.
Same.
We're going to be discussing ground news. You immediately know who they are if you spend basically any time on. I was going to say Google, but no, Google's incorrect. YouTube. YouTube is the word
Yeah.
I'm looking for, as they are quite prolific when it comes to sponsoring various different YouTubers. Now, I've watched about 2 minutes into this video, and there's a few interesting things already. So hopefully this is going to be quite a good one for us to react to, and let's give it a watch.
On this video sponsor, Ground News.
Ground News to sponsor this video.
Ground News.
Ground News is my favorite.
Ground News.
Ground News.
The Ground News.
Ground.
Just seeing the legal ego pop up. There was once a time, personally, I consider legal to be someone that, okay, can and totally be listened to until things completely started going downhill very quickly. But to each their own. If you like watching them, by all means, keep watching. And if that's what you enjoy, and you find him to be a trustworthy and reliable, I'm not going to tell you to think otherwise. You are more than welcome to have your own and views. That is just personally, I don't find him to be as credible of a resource as anymore. That is more something I would. There are some other sources that I would prefer going to that definitely try to stay significantly less biased.
News.
Ground 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 news. Ground news.
Ground news. Ground news.
Ground news.
So, if you have watched any kind of videos on YouTube covering business, finance, the economy, or current events, you have almost certainly had ground news drilled into your subconscious. For-profit news
Yeah.
coverage has become increasingly partisan as media companies have figured out that telling people what they want to hear makes way more money than doing real journalism.
And this is the hook that got me, because guys, you have heard me say over and over and over again, you are not immune to propaganda, no matter who you are. This includes myself, and you always need to fight to get out of your own echo chamber. The algorithm will tailor itself to you, and it will reinforce whatever engages you. Remember, the algorithm does not care, honestly, about what your political opinions are. It is an engagement machine, because that is how they drive profit. And we're going to get into a lot of shareholder value versus consumer value and that type of thing later on in the video. I can already sense that coming. But from an intellectual perspective and a logical perspective, you need to understand that, yes, you do need to develop trust with certain, let's say, news organizations or certain sources of authority, because it is impossible for you to be an authority on literally every subject in the world. There's just not enough time in a single lifetime, or even 10 lifetimes or 100 lifetimes, for one person to have the expertise to be an authority on every subject. So it is a natural consequence that we are going to develop these reliances on media sources and individual sources and primary, secondary, tertiary sources, all of this type of thing. But you will always need to understand that. How would I word this in a way that doesn't sound? We are all dumb at times. Even Lord Intellectual is dumb at times, because humans like to be efficient. And we need to understand that we do have those biases and we do have those filters in place. So the mission statement behind Ground News is something that I very much agree with, where it tries to present information as objectively as possible to give you alternative viewpoints and to basically present the biases within the media that you are consuming. Now, whether or not they fully achieve that goal is something that we're going to discuss in this video, but it is extremely important for you to remember that, as I said, you're not immune to propaganda, and whilst Ground News is sort of the subject of today, I do like the idea that we're going to have organizations that do try to present that. But sorry, to tie it back to what we're actually viewing on screen, with everything being an engagement machine, particularly mainstream media and mainstream news, you need to understand they're always going to sensationalize. They're always going to hit those extremes, because those extremes are what gets the reactions. If you want a perfect example, look at the Panama Papers. Like, that should have been, like, if they made a movie about that, it would be the most high stakes, intense action thriller, basically, about, oh, we're going to release these papers and it's going to change the world. And you know what? A lot of legitimate journalism and investigation went on to reveal the Panama Papers, and what changed? Very little, if anything at all. So I want you to bear that in mind as we move forward.
Okay, sorry. I really wanted to let him finish his thought thing. A lot of the points he's making, and I absolutely 100% agree with. And I really like the idea that Ground News is presenting, that they are supposed to be showing what is the left talking about, what is the right talking about, what is one side covering that the other is not, how things are balancing out, what are the differences in the headline and even between what the two are talking about, because each side will wildly in different directions sensationalize in ridiculous ways. And do I think, as a, from my experience with them, I don't think they always label it and the way it typically is. As there's a lot of very hard left-leaning stuff I've seen labeled on as centrist. Classic. But again, we should be getting into that later. One thing that I would like to bring up, I'm spacing on, sorry, concerning the algorithms. Each different site, be it YouTube, Google, X, Facebook, wherever, they all have their own algorithms. Those algorithms are ridiculously prone to change, and for the most part, yes, they will figure out what you like, what you want to watch, and try to feed you that information. Yeah. Does that mean that when they change the algorithm or tweak the algorithm, can they try to push content and toward the a kind of content it is pushing in front of you towards the direction that that platform or whoever's running that platform wants you to look at things and think? If you're going to tell me no, oh, I'm going to call you a bald-faced liar. Alright? Or completely blind. And quite frankly, I have zero impression that Google or YouTube or Facebook or even X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, that they will not, or that whoever is running it, whoever is making the changes to said algorithms, that they will not alter those algorithms to push the kind of content they want you to see, they want you to look at, in favor of what is actually going on. Or in favor of what you are more likely to look at. Otherwise, absolutely 100%, every side will sensationalize out the wazoo to get you to watch their stuff. Why? It's a big flashy headline. It's what grabs your attention. And to be frank, yeah, it works.
Ground News is apparently here to fix all that by highlighting journalistic biases, fact-checking misinformation, and alerting you when you might not be getting the whole story.
Again, this is good, and I do also just the community notes. Community notes are such a. I am so glad that those have been implemented. They just even yes, community notes also have their own set of issues, but when it comes to presenting actual information, it is just such a great tool to have. And none of these sources can be relied on in and of themselves, guys, but it all contributes towards a tool belt or a set of tools that we can use in combination to you'll never 100% get rid of false rhetoric, and there'll always be nuance and there'll always be room for other opinions and different takes, and two different people can look at the same objective facts and come away with two totally different opinions and ideas of what actually happened. But for the most part, when you rely on actual factual data that can be replicated, that can be peer reviewed and can be verified, then you get 90% of the way there, and the rest of the remaining 10%, I should say, kind of open to, I'm not going to say interpretation, but we do live in a messy world. And guys, I want to hear. Okay, here's something for you to put in the comments. I want to hear your examples of this, because there are. I mean, I did a video about a month ago before all of the account issues, where we were looking at everything to do with ICE and how people have totally different opinions and totally different. They walk away with totally different ideas on what happened watching the same video. where the same actions happen. It is the exact same video, and you can get entirely different viewpoints on that. Now, everything that was happening with ICE, obviously very emotionally charged, and there's a lot of other competing priorities in there. But that's one example from me, and I'd be very curious to hear if you have any examples from your own experience.
Okay, and that's another thing I would very much agree with him. In regards to the whole icing, and from what I was seeing, a lot of the responses to it were very, very much, well, this is what I want to hear. This is what I want to see based on my worldview. So this is what I'm going to see. This is what I'm going to hear. Alright? And so because that is what I want it to be. That is never the way it should be. And I will fight tooth and nail on that. In regard to the how you're getting your information, where you're getting your information from. With a lot of people, I am very much a proponent of verify. And if at all possible, verify with source information. I cannot tell you how many times I have heard about specific laws, us claiming, oh, well, they're outlawing this or they're outlawing that. And I end up going and looking up and pulling up the law as written, and reading through it, and given the understanding that I have gained from a corpo and legally, and which is face it, a lot of corpo talk is very well related and to legally is in the way that it's done. Thank you, HR. Because let's face it, HR's number one priority is don't or keep the company from getting sued. And so again, a lot of the legalese tends to get worked in there in very colorful and pretty language. Well, I should say colorful, very pretty and dressed up language. And that comes across a lot like legalese. And being able to sit there and go, that's not what this is saying at all. Like, where are y'all getting this beyond it's touching something that you care about, or, oh, hey, people don't understand just how bad this actually is based on what is written here, or being able to go and look at what changes what's been amended to a particular bill from the beginning to the end. And that's also another very interesting thing to look at in how many times and from where things have been amended. Or at least with X, one of the best things that they have done is community notes. Is it infallible? No, not at all. It is absolutely not infallible, but it has been such a wonderful tool to come to X. But let's go ahead and get on with that.
That's the pitch, anyway. And they are spending an ungodly amount of cash on influencers and traditional advertising to get the word out about it. Now, putting aside for a second that this money had to come from somewhere.
And I love that he highlighted that.
The bigger problem is this whole platform is probably only gonna make things worse. For as long as events have been recorded and reported on, there has always been an inherent bias to how that news is portrayed. Modern commercial media outlets are big businesses that have to keep their investors happy.
Pay attention to this section in particular, because this is what convinced me to make a react to this video.
To keep their investors happy, they have to keep their advertisers happy. And to keep their advertisers happy, they need access to news sources. And to maintain access to their news sources, they can't really push too hard against established corporate interests.
I've said this before and I'll say it again, guys. Remember, you are the product. You are not the customer. The customer is the shareholder in whatever company it is. And what do shareholders want? They want infinite growth. They want to invest $1 today and withdraw $1,000 tomorrow. That is what they want. It is essentially, well, to oversimplify to an extreme degree, all they want is a pump and dump. And you're just the mechanism through which they extract value. Remember, the old way of doing it was value generation, where it's you build a good product, you add value to someone's life, and you can expect to be compensated fairly for that. That is no longer the way that we operate. It is about extracting the value. This is why subscription prices go up. This is why everything is moving to a subscription service. And we're about to spin off into a whole other tangent. But if you want a real world example of that, look at what they did to Toys R Us. Toys R Us got bought out by private equity. Everyone who was part of the initial buyout made Toys R Us take out all of these ungodly amount of loans. They then paid all of that loan amount out as dividends, and those initial investors then sold their stake and their share after they'd loaded the company with all of this debt that they would never be able to survive from, got their bag back, and they left and moved off to greener pastures. Which, if you didn't know, do let me know if you want me to make a dedicated video on that, because I'm oversimplifying here to an extreme degree, but that is something that I have very, very strong opinions on.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. There, it's granted, is it a very oversimplification, but unfortunately, that's also the world we tend to live in. And while yes, we are in a technically free and open market, a lot of the way things in the real world operate have been bastardized by a corporatist environment, and where things work around corporation and the corporate idealism of we constantly need to be making more and more and more and more and more money. And the way a lot of companies do that is, how do we keep cutting corners? Not how can we make things better, how do we keep cutting corners? How do we make sure people keep coming back and spending money here with us, and not just spending money here with us? How do we keep getting them to spend more money here with us? So a number of companies have been in the past, even on that only deal business to business, as have been busted price fixing, and where several of the big companies, as part of that industry, will get together and decide, well, this is what we've decided this price will be, and so that way we're not all fighting over this, as we're going to keep, and there's really no other competition. We're going to set it to this extreme degree, and y'all are going to like it.
And I think would make a very, very interesting video, as long as you guys actually want to hear the full story there. But either or, just remember that is essentially what's going on. Your attention and your time does have a monetary value attached to it. So the question becomes, how can they extract that time, attention, and by extension monetary value from you? The answer is to give you all of these sensationalized headlines and make sure that you click and read and get ads served to you. So they'll do whatever they have to do to serve those ads to you.
Important stories have been left on the editor's desk because it would make the wrong people upset for as long as journalism has existed. But you have probably noticed that it does kind of feel like it's getting worse. Today, depending on what news outlet you choose to watch or read, you might get a completely opposite interpretation of events.
Zelensky really screwed up. President Trump is not just changing American foreign policy. He is reorienting America's moral compass.
A supposedly neutral platform like Ground News that aggregates these opposing opinions masquerading as news would be great if it worked. But there are a few problems with adding yet another filter between you and current events. And at the very least, before you spend...
There is also something to be said where you do need to develop your own media literacy, and you do need to develop the tools and techniques to be able to spot emotional manipulation and propaganda and that type of thing yourself, because you're not always going to be able to rely on a theoretical platform like Ground News. It's again, I do agree with the mission statement, but unless literally every piece of media then goes through Ground News, and then you're offloading that critical thinking onto another organization, which again puts you in a vulnerable position. So Ground News again would be a tool, or a organization like Ground News would be a tool in the belt. It would be a shortcut essentially. And I'm of the opinion, as long as you recognize that it is a shortcut, and before you ever actually take any action or you form any solid beliefs based on what you see on something like Ground News, you remember to actually go through and have a proper look at it so that you can exercise your own critical thinking, then I think it's fine. But you can't rely on it, whether it's Ground News or an organization like Ground News, just on its own, because you need to develop those skills for yourself, because you will use those skills in other areas of life as well.
100.
Again, that kind of goes back to where I was bringing up, always going back to the source material if at all possible. Because sometimes you will find, and hey, you go and read this as news article, be it Fox, CNN, and MSNBC, CBS, whoever, are even with smaller independent, they are not immune to this. As I repeat it, they are not immune to this. You, as go back, or even and small, more localized pieces of news media. They're not immune to the bias. They're not immune to the sensationalism. None of it. And it is imperative to be able to go back. If they're not citing sources, for one, to me that's a big red flag. If they are not, or if you can't find source material, and they're not citing sources, it's like, are they really the source? Again, this is a lot of where it's the whole trust but verify thing comes into play, where don't explicitly just take them at their word for it. And like when you're going and looking at reviews. Is when a new product comes out and everybody's slapping reviews out there, there are going to be some places that are going to be more reliable than others, as compared to some others. But at the same time, you're going to want to take a look at the ones that are more trustworthy, but don't, and go through some of the ones that you may enjoy, the ones you may like, right? And get an aggregate and watch as many of those reviews as you can, and to get a more encompassing idea as to what may be going on. Because what 6 reviewers may not find, one, maybe 3 may find it. And that one that may have found, one person finds an issue but nobody else experiences it, it may be a one-off thing, it may not be. And that's where the question kind of comes into play, but these are things that you need to be aware of, because the particular testing methodologies of certain outlets, as for a review per se, may better fit your particular use case as of a product over others. And a lot of that kind of sort of applies to like news as well, where a news organization out of Bangladesh, covering an event in San Antonio, Texas. As they may not have as good information as say an American news source. Alright? But again, that is a wildly extreme example. Um, but again, a lot of that comes down to where's the source material. Um, in incidences involving a police officer and a suspect where something happened, they have body cam footage. And what are the police? What are the reports saying? Is there recordings from other people in the area? How or what are the different angles this can be viewed at? This is still not infallible, as people are going to implement their own biases to what they see, as we saw with the whole ICE situation. But being able to recognize your own bias and be able to adjust what you are, the way you are perceiving things, and according to your own bias, you try to hit a more neutral spot, may be a way to go. That's up to you to decide how you want to be able to interpret things and to look at it in a more base factual level.
$100 a year on yet another subscription, you should understand
I did not know it was $100 a year, though.
what those problems are. Number one,
Sorry. I'm starting and stopping. That was just, I get, so this is a blind react, that's how you know. But yeah, I didn't realize there was an organization that is providing a service like this, yes, does deserve to be paid. You should absolutely. That is one. A service like this is one service where I can see a subscription being of value. Whether it's worth $100 a year, though, that's roughly what, $7.50, $8 a month, give or take. Yeah, it's a bit tricky. Let me know what you guys think. Would you pay $8 a month for a service like Ground News? It's one of those things where it's going to be different for every people. If you read a lot of Ground News, then it absolutely makes sense. But if it's just something that's in the background that comes across your dash every now and then, it comes a little bit harder. Because costs do add up like that. But then again, if they don't charge you anything, then they're back to being relying on advertisers and then relying on shareholders, yada, yada, yada. I will need to actually check if Ground News has any shareholders. But hey, maybe we'll talk about it in this video.
is who it gets its money from. Number
There we
two is
go.
the oversimplified way it categorizes biases. Number three is the use of AI to further remove you from what is actually happening. Number four is the better, simpler, cheaper alternatives you can use to do exactly the same thing. And finally, the biggest problem of all is the biases it can't account for. So yeah, starting with that money problem. They claim in their advertising that they are independently subscriber funded.
Ground News themselves are independently owned and funded by subscribers.
And see, theoretically, that is exactly what you want. But we'll see. He sounds like he's leading into something here, so let's see what he says.
Like myself, and they're vetted by 3 different independent news monitoring organizations.
But that's stretching the truth so far that it might as well be a lie. All of the advertising they have been doing is not cheap. There is a reason you can't avoid their message, and that's because they are conservatively spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a month here on YouTube alone. And that's on top of expenses like hosting their website, paying their staff, and renting their office. All of this costs a lot of money. And while today the company might have a lot of subscribers, it didn't start out like this. They are a private company, so financials and public records are scarce. But according to their own website, the company was backed by a handful of mission-aligned independent individual investors with no ties to corporate media, big tech, or government affiliations. That sounds great, but it's almost so specific that it raises some red flags. If I was asking you to come and hang out with some new pals I just met, and I told you, don't worry, because they're a bunch of chill guys who have no ties to the KGB, the mob, or ivory poachers, that's not a great sign. Now, of course,
He's making the asbestos-free cereal argument.
that's a silly, speculative example. But all we have is speculation. Because for a company that's all about transparency of information, that's all they have ever said about the source of their founding capital. They have actually been questioned about these investors multiple times online before, and every time they respond with the exact same generic copy and paste from their About page. Realistically, most private equity and venture capitalists are not aligned with corporate media, big tech, or the government. But that doesn't mean they don't have their own objectives, which is primarily making a profit. Now, I actually reached out to Ground News for further clarification around how much money they raised from their investors and what their background actually was, instead of just what it wasn't. But as of the time of releasing this video, I have not heard back from them. Now, they are a
Doesn't
rapidly
surprise
growing
me.
business with a lot going on, so not taking the time to respond to some random wannabe YouTuber is not a smoking gun by itself. But it should be a simple question with a simple answer for a company that is built on transparency. So, anyway, I had to do a little bit more digging. Ground News is actually the second business started by a holding company called Snapwise Incorporated. It was founded by siblings Harleen Kouar and Sukh Singh, and before reshaping global media, they worked for an impressive list of consulting companies, startups, and even
Yeah, so this is the type of, for lack of a better term, investigative journalism that we like to see, actually checking the sources. So this is very good. Very good points.
NASA.
This is actually a lot of information that I didn't know about. Not totally certain, and I feel like I have heard of Blackbirds before. Not for good things. I'm still not 100% certain on what exactly it was, but I do feel like I have heard of Blackbirds before.
The first company they founded was called UCIC, which was supposed to be like a real-time version of Google Street Views, but is now defunct. The point is that with their
If I remember correctly, Google's version of that was Google Earth.
background in startups and management consulting, these non-affiliated investors are most likely just wealthy institutions or individuals that the founders had developed relationships with. It's also not immediately disqualifying, but it should also be noted that the founders of Ground News don't have a background in journalism. Realistically, they aren't building this company after decades of seeing the problems in the failing journalism industry. They are building it for the same reason they started their other company, because it's a trendy business that can raise cash. But again, every single issue that has been raised so far easily be addressed with a little bit of transparency around their financials and their investors. As a brand that makes a big deal in all of their advertising about exposing who really owns the media companies you are getting your news from, their own vagueness about the same issue is ironic at best.
See, this is an excellent point.
But where their money is
Yeah, again, and these are known for a lot of CNN, and it tends to and NBC are both tend to be fairly left leaning, and whereas Fox News tends to be very right leaning. And do they not? Are every, by my understanding, every news place will have someone from the opposing side there. Yes, as Fox News, by my understanding, does have someone who is more on a left-leaning side, whereas CNN and NBC does have each have someone that is more right-leaning, and However, they are primarily, and like the CNN and NBC, they will tend to lean left, and Fox News tends to lean right. And again, and a lot of that, what they may call factual, may align with and who's giving them money, and if money is changing hands. And because this is as absolutely something that I could see a particular news organization are paying them money under the table to then and go like, hey, yeah, we need you to make us look like we're more centrist or make us look good, and see these other guys, we don't like them. You need to bring their factuality into question.
Like, at best.
See, this is an excellent point.
But where their money is coming from is actually far from the biggest problem here. The bigger issue is who is not getting the money. Ground News works by scraping articles from thousands of different sources and then bringing together the bullet points on their website. The problem this creates is that most people won't go and read from those sources after they have seen the highlights, which means those media organizations are denied ad or subscription revenue from their work. Now, I know it's hard to feel bad for giant media companies, but remember, just a few months ago, Honey was exposed for being the biggest scam in YouTube history by stealing affiliate revenue of social media influencers. Now, I'm not calling Ground News a scam. In fact, I really want them to just tweak a few things to provide a much better service. But this revenue shifting is basically exactly the same thing as what Honey was doing. But I would argue that, as bad as they can be, news outlets need money more than influencers do. Part of the reason that journalism has become more polarized is that it's very hard to make money by just reporting the news these days.
I mean, there's also a lot of risks involved as well. The payout does not always justify the. Again, you want an example? Look at the Panama Papers. People were literally assassinated over that. People that did good work to bring this to light, and what did they get for it? They got dead. Oh, I should. There's a there is a more eloquent way to put that. My apologies, but it does highlight that yes, people want good journalism, and people want proper sources, they want the work done so that they can trust the stories that they read. The problem a lot of people don't want to admit to is that it can take a dedicated journalist or a dedicated team of journalists months to go through and verify facts and check sources and track things down and do everything else that comes with proper investigative journalism. And who's going to pay for that team of journalists when these articles are either largely free or they're only supported by advertisers, whether that be a banner ad on a website or page ads within a magazine or newspaper, whatever your preferred format is. And this is where we get into ethics in journal. And you know what? This even kind of ties back to Gamergate from like Gamergate? God, sorry, my apologies. Gamergate from like a decade or so ago. It's
which has made it resurgent, and people have tried making it resurgent, and there's Gamergate 2.0.
And this is an argument that has been raging in the journalism world for basically as long as journalism has been a thing. Don't forget the old fake news used to be the old Victorian newspapers where you had the little newspaper boys standing on the street shouting the headlines, and the more salacious the headline was, the more papers it would sell. So they were incentivized to just print whatever egregious, scandalous, engaging headline sounded the most extreme, because that is what people would stop and buy off of the little paperboy, and that is how they made their money. And I do believe they actually ended up having to pass what is effectively fake news laws in Victorian England because this became so prolific. So it's not as if fake news is a new thing. So this again, we get back to the idea of the effort isn't worth the payout. So this is kind of a natural consequence. And when you add someone like Ground News, who is, yes, technology has changed, and if they're scraping the articles of, so imagine you do have that team of journalists who do the proper investigation, and it takes them months and months and months, and whatever paper, let's just insert whichever paper you support here, news organization you support here. They've paid all this money to all of these journalists. These journalists have taken all the risks to get this very well written, very well researched, backed up, sorted document created. And then someone like Ground News comes and spends a few cents to scrape that article, summarize it with AI, serve it to you with the potential biases behind it. Exactly what he's saying. You might read the highlights, but you won't actually go read the individual articles. So they've spent all of this money for effectively no return. So I would like to hear from you guys what you think a potential solution to this issue would be, because we have had some goes at it. Like, there are state-sponsored journalists and news organizations. Like, look at the ABC in Australia. We just did a video on them, but then look at how look at how the politics affects that. The ABC is certainly not unbiased, let's say, to be clear.
Not in the slightest.
I want to hear what you guys think, because this is not something we're going to solve today, but having that open discussion is really important, and getting that breadth of ideas in the comments section is going to be really important, especially on a subject as important as this.
That's none of the news organizations here in the U.S. are unbiased. As I will firmly hold, there is almost no unbiased news organization on the planet. At the degree to which they are biased may vary, but there is not a single one that does not have a bias. I will fight that tooth and nail. Be that as it may. And before people go straight, no, the intellectual is anti-AI. It's like, no, absolutely not. There is a difference between anti-AI and seeing issues with the way AI is being infused that negatively impacts people in a very real way. For example, the whole hey, it is actively stealing people's work, or people utilizing it to effectively steal the hard work that journalists may go through trying to create or generate an article, only to have like Ground News go and like, oh, that's ours now. That's months of work that someone's not getting paid, or suddenly not getting paid for. The other fun part about that kind of goes into, the whole sense idea that news isn't just the cold hard facts, that even way back when, before, or even founding of the U.S., as that a lot of news sources were highly sensationalized. Why? What gets you to, or grabs your attention? And the weather, or the news story about someone getting shot. Guaranteed, the news story about someone getting shot versus as here's the weather for the next 7 days. It's gonna win out every time. Sure is as hey, here's the weather the next 7 days. It's kind of hard to sensationalize that, and when it's the same as it's been every year. Well, we're following historical trends. Oh, we're a little hot this year. Oh, things are a little chillier than normal. Those kinds of things, they don't grab your attention. And like breaking news, it's not the same. And there is a reason why these companies and it is so prolific in like movies where they'll show the inside of a newsroom going over well, which stories are we gonna cover? Well, I've got this super important story. And yeah, no one's gonna care about that. We've got this other one on that we can and really hyper sensationalize and really grab people's attention. And yeah, but this one's super important, and it's about like solving this crisis. As yeah, we can't sensationalize that. And it's unfortunate that is a real trend that tends to happen in that the more important, or what maybe seem to be more important stories get pushed on the back burner, whereas the big sensationalized ones are the ones that get all the attention.
Investigative journalism is slow and expensive, and most stories are not that interesting to most people.
There we go.
Making news that is more like reality television that occasionally recounts current events in a partisan way is far more engaging, and in the attention economy, engagement equals dollars.
Again, what I was just saying. If they can grab your attention with something they can sensationalize more, they get more money.
Ground News has clearly seen this problem, and they are capitalizing on it. But unfortunately, with their current business model, they are most likely only making it worse. Now, like all good modern startups, Ground News has also introduced AI features to make digesting news even easier by taking articles from the left, right, and center and running them through a chatbot to give you some dot point summary of an issue. It is easier to read, but it makes it even less likely that Ground News users will engage with the actual news publishers, denying them revenue for their work.
Yep, basically everything that I just said.
Now,
Again, 100% agree with them. And the way they tend to decide what's left, what's right, what's center, they tend to label a lot of things center when they come from very left leaning. Like here, PBS NewsHour. It's like, I don't know that I would call our public broadcasting organization, and during that time period, and they're getting when they're getting federal funding and from the U.S. government during the time period where the Democrats are in charge, they don't want to make the government look bad at that time when they're being funded by party and that they may like. They're gonna go a little more left, but if they're being labeled as centrist, it may not quite work out that way. And so yes, they do tend to lean more to the left. Of the major news networks here in the U.S., the one and only one that I would say would be right-leaning is Fox. The other ones all very much tend to run left.
a final point about the money is how much of it they are spending on advertising. You have probably seen more ads for Ground News than you have for any news site that actually publishes their own stories. And this is highly indicative of a company that is trying to grow at all costs.
Yes, this is the other thing. If they are a subscription-based model and their only costs are, scraping other news sites who are actually doing the bulk of the work, then the staff in the office and right now the marketing especially, but once they have that established base, we have seen this play out over and over and over again, especially when it comes to private equity. is that they'll corner that market, they'll get their market base, and then they'll start to jack up the price, and then you get things like enshrification and all of this other type of stuff. But this is the typical playbook of growth at all costs early on, so that they can have what is essentially a permanent pay pig moving forward. So if you get 100 million subscribers to this, I mean, I don't know how large Ground News are or if they'll ever reach that size, but what did he say? $100 a year times 100 million. That is a lot. That is a lot of money every single year, and that's recurring revenue as well. And what do you have to do to get that revenue? You have to host some servers that do some bot scrapers and host a website. Yeah, you'll have some staff on hand to maintain that, but for the most part, it is a very, very low cost business. Because you're not selling a physical product and you're not actually providing. It's not. It even goes a step beyond SaaS, software as a service, because yeah, it is essentially a website. So I can see the conflict of interests there, and I can also see why it's becoming. Sorry, the point I'm trying to get at is I can see why they are being so aggressive with their advertising, because yes, as he points out, very low overhead business, going to be able to earn a lot of reliable recurring revenue, and they're not responsible for the product they're serving either. Now, the flip side of that is they do that too much, and obviously all the actual news sites are going to go under. Whether you consider that a good thing or a bad thing is neither here nor there. But that almost seems somewhat parasitic, doesn't it? That's an interesting way to think of that. But then again, it is also helpful to have a platform like this to try and rein in the primary sources.